Accident. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sugar Pills, a practical guide to self-care. So if you are listening to this on the podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review, and share this with a friend. Join me over on Instagram at Candy Washington and tag me with your aha moments. If you're watching this over on the YouTube channel, welcome to the Candy Shop, my lovely little candy canes, and be sure to like and subscribe to this video as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce everyone to the lovely guest that we have today, which is Gigi Robinson. And Gigi is a USC graduate and current master's student whose passion is creating content with an intention of making a positive impact on as many young people as possible through imagery and videography. Gigi often speaks about the ways that she can expose false imagery in media, posing tips, behind the scenes of image making, philanthropy, and advocacy work across her social media platforms, and in articles such as The Female Lead, Entertainment Weekly, Yahoo, and Viacom. And I know Gigi has some really fun new projects coming up that we will dive into. But let's first say thank you, Gigi. Thank you so much for being here. And then do you want to tell everyone just a little bit more about yourself? And then how did you sort of rise to being this, body positivity digital creator?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. If you hear some sirens in the back, I am in New York City, so I think it just goes with like the ambiance of the mood. But I'm a born and raised New Yorker, and I spent my entire life here looking at billboards that I saw or advertisements, and I quickly fell in love with photography when I was about, I would say, 10 or 11 years old, when I actually got diagnosed with my chronic illness. And I had to shift my focus from wanting to be a swimmer to something else. And that just happened to be photography and art for me. And as I, really fell into that, I ultimately just realized there was so much more that goes on with photography than I think a lot of people even realize when it comes down to editing, retouching, even selecting the best images.
Oh, Gigi, I think you froze for a little bit.
A person is in their essence. Oh,
Oh, you're okay. I think
am I back?
Let me Yes, you're back. Okay. No, you're good. You're good. We can just keep flowing. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah. So you were saying Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I could try to connect to a different like Wi-Fi network instead of my hotspot if you want me to.
No, it's okay. Don't worry about it. Okay. Yeah, we'll keep flowing. Don't worry. Yeah. So you said your chronic illness. Do you ever say exactly what it is? Are you comfortable with that, just in case somebody else is suffering from the same kind?
Yes, I deal with a rare genetic disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, EDS for short. And I talk about it all over my platforms. I have a couple of others, but all of the symptoms of my EDS and of the other issues are basically from that chronic illness and under that umbrella of what is called dysautonomia, which is basically the dysfunction of your autoimmune system. So that is unfortunate, but what I deal with. And yeah, it's been interesting to kind of navigate, especially through my teenage years and also now into my 20s. There's definitely a lot of different aspects of my life that are affected by it, whether I realize it or have realized it in the past, or I'm just becoming aware of it now.
Yeah, and so for those of us who might not be familiar with what that is, what are the symptoms? Are you tired? Are you in pain? Is it your stomach? Is it your head? Like what are the symptoms of the illness?
So essentially it is chronic pain, chronic fatigue, chronic migraines, joint pain, back pain, headaches. The list really goes on. Part of the other thing that I think is really inconvenient about EDS is that it essentially is a lack of collagen in your ligaments and tissues and your muscles. So it makes it harder to support joints the way that they're supposed to be supported in like a normal, healthy body. So that leads to dislocations, lack of support, bad posture. And because of that, the biomechanics that you go through as a patient living with this condition can really cause and make your life just very difficult at a lot, something as simple as sitting on a chair properly, getting up, going for a walk, picking up a backpack are all things that I really do sometimes have a lot of difficulty with. And there are things that you can do either taking a more holistic approach. There's also ways that you can treat this in a more, I think, Western medical setting. But I myself have tried the Western ways, and I'm going full on holistic and trying to be as natural as I can. So a lot of those kind of techniques, I also just wanted to acknowledge the fact that like, I am a white woman. I have great health care under my parents because of their job. I also live in New York City, one of the best places in the world for doctors and specialists that deal with this condition. So I am working on sharing more resources to people that may not have those same privileges as much as I can. And I know not everyone even has the privilege to take a holistic approach. So I just wanted to put that out there and also just acknowledge it because I talk about it a lot in my work. And I think it's important to address that just overall, because this illnesses of all kinds affect all kinds of marginalized communities, including disabled people on top as one of their identity, I think. And it just can be a lot to deal with as a whole. So yeah, I don't even know where I'm going with this. Sometimes I just can't a little, but
yeah. It's okay. It's good. No, I just wanted to thank you so much for like sharing your story and sharing your symptoms and what your illness is. Because I think for anyone who might be listening or watching, there are people who go their life with chronic pain or chronic fatigue and they get misdiagnosed or they don't know what's wrong with them. So I think to hear somebody else's story and they say, this is what I go through, if someone identifies with that, they may be able to go to their doctor and say, hey, I heard this girl, she has the same symptoms as I do. I'm not alone. Maybe I'm suffering from the same thing, and they can get diagnosed as well. So just thank you so much for sharing that story. And then how does that feed into your IGTV series, Everything You Need Is Within? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that series and what inspired it and what you're doing on your platform?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot. I think having this condition has obviously been a majority of the adversity that I think I've faced as a woman, and as also an artist. It's provided me with an opportunity to kind of shift the narrative from this like thing that happened to me, and it just being really difficult to like deal with, to having it be this thing that happened to me, being able to create art as a way to process everything that's happened, and then being able to share it and help others through it. I think that's just like, that was a pivotal moment for me, which I can explain in more depth. People have heard, I've shared this with other podcasters and in YouTube videos about my experience more in depth. But what inspired the Instagram TV series was two things. One, when I was a kid, my dad used to say, all you need is within you now. And over the years, I feel like I adopted that saying into Everything You Need Is Within. It's a little shorter. It's, in my opinion, a little more catchy, a little more modern, whatever. So I kind of took that idea, and the way that I found out about this idea of doing an Instagram TV show was just like, I was like, okay, I have all of these ideas. I have all these conversations and these people in my network who deal with the same thing. What if I share my platform and bring other people onto it and show them, that their conversations worthy, their stories worthy. I think that's the whole idea behind podcasting and short form videos. It's storytelling, and that's what I wanted to do. But I wanted to do it in a way based on a lot of my other values of not editing and being authentic and being transparent. So like this conversation where I kind of stumble on my words and I tangent a little, that's stuff that's intrinsic to who we are as people. We're never on our A game unless we're rehearsing, which is totally fine. There's places for that in this world. But on my platform, I like to be transparent. I like to keep it real. I also like to call myself out, just to acknowledge, again, privilege, because I think a big part of acknowledging it is not only saying, yes, like I'm a white woman. It's like, you're a white woman. What can you do to help other people who don't have those privileges? How can I, again, share my platform, share as much knowledge as I can, acknowledge other people's trauma and their background, and incorporate it into my work to elevate their stories. And that's like the goal as a storyteller, as a photographer. Yeah, that's the goal. And I'm not sure if I've announced this yet, so I don't know when this is going live, but that show is actually going to be a podcast really soon.
Yeah.
So everyone,
can we say the platform? Because I know the platform. Are we allowed to say it?
Not yet.
Okay.
But
congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you. But yeah, you'll hear about it if you give me a follow, or I guess maybe Candy eventually will.
I'll come on yours. I'll come on your podcast. It'll be good.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. We're going to do a little flip flop on our shows, but yes, I'm really, really excited about that. And I feel like it's gotten to a point also where I finally, I knew that it mattered, but the fact that I feel like it's getting some form of syndication and it got picked up by this company. Like, I'm just really excited about it. And I know that you also have your podcast syndicated with iHeartRadio, which is like obviously so freaking cool. I live in New York City, so I literally drive by the iHeartRadio sign all the time, and I'm like, great. Oh my God, my girl Candy.
Yeah, it's so exciting. That's so exciting, and congratulations. And very well-deserved, very well-deserved. I think when you put out valuable content, people start to notice. But I did want to get your opinion on something. I know that body positivity has become such a buzzword. We hear about it all the time, but it can kind of get confusing as to what's the difference between being body positive and then kind of going on the other extreme to body shaming.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things here that I wanted to point out. Mm-hmm. The first thing, which I think is a misconception across a lot of, like you said, the buzzword terminology that people have just kind of performatively used, body positivity. But that term, I mean, anyone listening can just look this up. Look up the difference between body positivity, body confidence, body acceptance, and body neutrality, because they are all a bit different. Body positivity refers to, and ultimately was coined by marginalized women, people of color, of a plus size, to fit them into their own space on the internet and also within the fashion industry. So when I did a lot of reflection over the summer of 2020, I sat back and I said, you know what, I am using this term, but it was brought to my attention that I don't qualify as a plus size woman. I don't qualify as like a person of color. So why am I putting myself within this bubble? I don't want to take up space that's not mine. And I think, again, that's another moment where I had to step back, own my mistake, acknowledge my privilege, and figure out where I did fit in. Now, as a disabled woman, yes, I guess you could say there's a lot of body positivity in there as well, but I personally found my values more aligned with this idea of body confidence and body acceptance and body neutrality, where in all of those, you're accepting people for who they are as they are. That's body acceptance. Body confidence is really teaching people how to love their bodies and fall into that pattern of body confidence, and body acceptance of just accepting your body as you are. Don't need to go down the rabbit hole of diet culture or any of that. And then body neutrality is, again, just kind of like this discourse in media of how we talk about bodies and making sure that they're not like fetishized for whatever they're looking like. So I wanted to point that out first. But secondly, on the note of body shaming, I think it's obviously perpetuated by media. big outlets. We know this. We all get the ads on our Daily Mail on Snapchat that say, you know, Khloe Kardashian edits this, Kim edits this, Kylie edits that, and so on and so forth. It could be about any celebrity. Maybe it's about, I saw one of Camila Cabello, who was not wearing, she was wearing, you know, just like a bikini in the water, and paparazzi got her, and you could see some of her cellulite, and like she had a little overhang on her belly, and I'm like, good for her. Like,
Yeah.
like, why is there a negative story? Like, who are you to judge someone else's body? I bet you, well, actually, I'm not going to say what I want to say about the reporter, because I didn't know the reporter that wrote that. But all I can say is, if people are reporting on other people's bodies or other people's appearance in 2021, I think we got to get our values checked a little, because there's no place for that. There's way more important things to report on. Another thing that I'm very passionate about is representing the United Nations and following the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And if you don't know about them, there's 17 of them. You can look them up, UNSDG, Sustainable Development Goals. And, you know, it's about gender equality. It's about climate change. It's about ending world hunger, and so on and so forth. And I think if we all shifted our focus on that, instead of making people feel bad and self-conscious about themselves and their bodies and their confidence, like, in what world are we living in where it's normal for outlets to really pick apart the people that we are idolizing? Like, I just think it's really awful. And I will also say that if these media outlets want to really shift the narrative, and, you know, make body confidence a normal thing, make body acceptance a normal thing, which I believe it already should be.
Right.
They have to have this training around what they're pushing out and how it's affecting, and again, perpetuating this cycle of insecurity, and especially in youth and the generations growing up with social media at their fingertips. So I know that was quite a mouthful, and it was somewhat heavy, but there's more important issues, in my opinion, than body shaming people on the internet.
Absolutely. Where do you think the onus lies with the consumer of the content? So I always kind of play both sides. So when I think about, you know, Instagram feeds and magazines and TV and all that stuff, where do you think the onus lies on the person who's consuming the content to, one, realize that this is probably edited, it's digital, it's photoshopped. I don't get my sense of self-worth from a curated feed from somebody else. So where does the line come from how much the person creating the content is socially responsible for what they're putting out, and then how much is it on the person who's consuming the content to do their own and personal internal work to be body confident, to be mindful of what they're consuming, and to be able to look at like a Kim K and say, okay, she aesthetically looks this way, but in reality, I know it's plastic surgery, it's this, that, and third, and I'm going to look at this as entertainment, not so much as where I get direction from my self-worth from.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question, and it always loops back to this idea of social media literacy, which, if anybody follows me, I actually go and I'm doing like a college and high school speaking tour this fall, which it's out. It's been announced for about a month now, but I've spoken at some big universities this past spring. And on the note of that, the lecture and the ideas that I talk about, they're tailored based on what group I'm talking to, because obviously, like, high schoolers will not always understand the things that I'm saying to college students, and vice versa. But being mindful of your audience is something I take very seriously. For example, a majority of my audience on TikTok, I'm not sure about as like a whole what the status is, but in terms of my specific audience, it's 90% women, and of that, I believe like 40% of that is below the age of 18. So I know that I have to tailor my content in a way that is respectful, responsible, authentic, and also, like, I need to be aware of what I'm saying, because you never know what somebody younger than you is going to like interpret that as. So an example of this, which also anyone listening, just look up TikTok what I eat in a day videos and impact on eating disorders or disordered eating habits. This is something, again, I take very, very seriously as somebody who's covered disordered eating in the past. These what I eat in a day videos, right? Let's say if you're in the position of a creator, let's tackle that one first. If you're in the position of a creator and you don't know your audience, or maybe you do, I don't know. And you post this what I eat in a day video, or this is how I work out video to lose 40 pounds in 6 months, right? Let's just say that's the video, because I've seen videos like this. Then you put that out there, it goes viral, gets 1 million, 2 million views or something. And what you don't realize is in sharing that, your audience, again, let's say this is all younger women, they're looking at that saying, I want to lose 40 pounds. I'm going to do exactly what Susie did to lose that 40 pounds. And I'm going to eat that way. And I'm going to work out and burn myself down to the ground, which I know far too well from my chronic illness. And we don't like burnout here. That's something I also advocate against. Yeah. What Susie, the creator, doesn't realize is how Jane Doe, the 12-year-old looking at it, is going to develop disordered eating, and it's going to impact her body image and say, oh, I didn't look good at whatever weight I am now. I need to lose that 40 pounds because Susie did it. And again, that comes down to the creator's responsibility. As a creator, you have a platform. It's a privilege to have a platform and to be able to provide information to people, whether that's educational or entertainment, which there are both. But again, if you're doing something that's about weight loss, I mean, good for you. If you want to share your journey, just be mindful of what it could do to other people. It's not saying don't ever post this. It's just saying that here's what I've done. It worked for me. That's not to say it's not going to work for you. Even adding a disclaimer, like something as simple, or don't push yourself.
Yeah. And to that point, and not to cut you off, but just to that point, because I think it's a really meaningful one. I think it goes back to other like buzzwords in the space, like transparency. So, it's like the whole thing with like the Kylie Jenner lip kit. She's like, oh, you buy this lip kit, you're going to get lips like this. But the truth is she went to the doctor, got lip injections, pumped up, plastic surgery. Her lips were not that way because of lip liner or a lip gloss. But go buy this and you'll look like me, when that's not true. So to me, I think that's where you really lose integrity, when you're not actually being authentic and transparent about exactly what it is, and you're trying to push something in order to get a monetary gain by preying on the insecurities of other people.
And so monetary can also be like attributed to this idea of virality, right? Like right now, being viral or going viral and having a presence is somewhat trendy. So everyone's trying to do it. You can also see that effect. I mean, what was that Netflix show, The Social Dilemma, I think, kind of highlighted a bit of this relationship. And I mean, Black Mirror did do this in one of their episodes. I forgot what it was called. It was in one of the earlier seasons, but where, your life and your worth and your life, the longevity of your life was based off of how many likes you had and where you were placed in society dealt with that. And I kind of see this, like, obviously it's not as extreme, and those were very extreme examples on TV because TV is extreme. But it did do that, and it is the responsibility of the creator to fess up and take ownership of it. But I think the action steps, because in all of my speeches, like, I don't want to just deliver you information. I want to provide you with some action steps here. I would say try as much as you can to learn about the effects on social media and your mental health. Read a research paper. Because social media is still relevantly new, research is currently happening. And I think it's really interesting to take a look at that. I'll also send you some articles by this USC professor that I spoke in his class. There's also this amazing professor from a university in Italy that I have and will be speaking to again to her class, which is crazy, international speaker, like what? But I'll send you their research papers, and it delves into this idea of like, what is the influencer? How does it influence business? How does it affect the business from a PR stage, right? We can take Olivia Jade moment with Lori Loughlin and that whole thing. We don't have to go too far into it. You can just watch what the red, is it called the Red Table? I'm so forgetful.
Red Table Talk?
Yeah, the Red Table Talk that they had her on. And I just found it so interesting because like she went to my school, but I saw this person with immense privilege financially, literally being like, you know, this like white woman who bought her way into school, or her parents did. And all these brands pulled out away from her because of that situation. They didn't want to be affiliated with it. And I think on that note, we can tie a little bit of brands and marketing into this with this idea of social media. Is in the past year, I think especially Gen Z and millennial maybe generations have gotten very firm on acknowledging and calling out brands when they are either being performative or whether they don't say anything at all. And I personally know that I've shifted my values to be focused on working with brands that make a difference and working with nonprofits that are going to change the world. And again, all of this comes from educating myself on this idea of social media literacy. How can I promote products that I'm not just promoting for a paycheck, right? And this would have to be something that would shift in the entire influencer industry, which is obviously going to be difficult. But if there was anything I look for and hope happens soon, is that the same way that there used to be like home ec classes, that there's social media classes, and we're taught how to use it responsibility. We're taught, hey, like maybe it's like, yeah, it's not so good to be on social media the second you get up. I'm guilty of it. I know I turn over and I check my notifications first thing in the morning. I should be turning over and reading a book in the morning, right? Like how can we get back to that? Or can we even get back to that is a question I would pose to people. And
like to that point, one thing that I always think is that sure, we should teach social media literacy, maybe as more like a business class, but I think like when it comes to schools, we need to start teaching like emotional intelligence. Like we need to start teaching like self-confidence, emotional intelligence, emotional literacy. So that we catch the kids at this younger age, so they are conditioned and they learn how to be body confident. They learn how to be body positive if they fall into that group. They know like what the terms are. They know how to honor themselves. So to the name of your IGTV series, they're learning at a very young age that everything they have is within. So then they're not looking to the Kardashians of the world, to the Jades of the world, to the woman who's like, drink this tea and lose 20 pounds in 10 days of the world. They have a foundation. They have a strong sense of self. And I think that is what's truly lacking in our education system, is teaching young people the power of their own value and worth. I think we need one of those. I mean, home ec is great, but like, teach me how to love me, and then I can go sew if I want to. I think that's really what's missing.
I love that. And on a second, I guess like a secondary thing that I think has to be changed inherently with education systems is also how we view marginalized people, how we respond to trauma, also how we, I do apologize for the notification. I'm quitting my apps. Love digital technology. But it's this idea of like, how can we raise the next generation of kids to be more compassionate and not only fight for equality, but have equity in it. This is an idea that I really think about all the time whenever I put out work or whenever I'm working on something that I'm doing regarding to allyship or elevating someone else's voices, is how can I support whatever the cause is or whatever the community is outside of my social media, right? How can I go to a rally if that works for you? I physically couldn't go to a lot of the protests last summer because of COVID and my chronic condition. I was immunocompromised. I physically, it was a barrier I couldn't go to. That did not mean that like I wasn't participating. I was donating. I think I donated more than half of my like income from June and July to different organizations that supported BLM and Justice for George and anything that I could do to support that. When it came around to Asian hate crimes, like how can I support that? How can I attend all the live streams? How can I learn as much as I can while also having a boundary with myself saying, not all my time can be spent on social media. How can you, once things open up, like how can you go to maybe a women's shelter? Support people there. How can you go to a soup kitchen? Support people there. And I think all of these things are very important. And unfortunately, I think, at least from some of my peers who work with teens routinely, they're saying that kids aren't being taught this idea of gratitude. You have to intercept them at this age where I think they're understanding a little bit about what compassion is and how they can not just be this person behind the screen. Like, how can we have this face-to-face conversation in a virtual world? How can we be considerate of each other's identity and trauma in a world where we can't even meet face-to-face? And it poses a lot of really interesting, I think, conversations back and forth between what can we teach people, what innovative education systems can we put into place, and also how as adults can we be the example. Like, don't they always say lead by example, right? Like, how can adults and media companies and the people that control them step it up and demand that, you know, okay, on every magazine cover that's been retouched, like, why aren't we saying this has been altered, this has been retouched, right? And that will again shape people's self-confidence. When you feel better, you treat other people better. I don't know if you've heard that also. That's a big phrase in the chronically ill community. So I think it's all related.
No, it's definitely all related. And I also think to that point, like once we start teaching compassion, gratitude, emotional intelligence, self-confidence and all that stuff, I think everything will start to shift, because it's not like, yes, it's great for, you know, to have allies who want to, you know, participate in BLM and stop Asian hate. But on the flip side of that, we also need to start talking to people who are white supremacists and start talking about that. Like, where does your hate come from? Where is that rooted in? Like, on what level do you hate yourself so much that you feel like you have to hurt other people to feel valid within yourself? So I think that's the elevated next step, where it's like, yeah, it's great to join us, but you also have to look in the mirror beyond your privilege, but to like, what is making so many white people this angry? Where they're literally storming the Capitol on June 6th. Like, they're literally stormed the Capitol of the United States of America. Like, I never thought that would ever happen in my lifetime or in anybody's lifetime. Like, that is absurd and crazy. And that they're literally allowed to do it, and they got away with it. And then you think about all of the mass shootings, like not to racially profile, but the profile of that are usually like young to middle-aged angry white men. And we're not talking to them. Like, I think, we need to look, you know, Justice for George and say Breonna's name, but we also have to look at the people creating, like, doing these crimes and that are so full of hate, and get to the root of their hate and really do that, because that to me is the root cause of the disease. You know, doing BLM, doing the marches, doing the everything else, that's just treating the symptoms, but we're not treating the disease itself. And the disease itself really is white supremacy and hate, if we just want to be completely transparent about it. And that's where it really all stems from. So it's just like, nobody's really talking about how do we, I don't think it'll ever be cured, but how do we at least start to manage it? How do we start to address it? How do we start to the healing process of that? Because I think we're doing all of the very surface performative stuff, but we're not actually getting to the heart of it. So I think, I don't know the answer to that. Obviously, I wish I did, but I think we need to start having more of those conversations as well.
Yeah, I also think the fact, I mean, I, oh my gosh, I don't remember the exact number, so you may have to fact check me here
No,
or
it's okay. You can just say
back me up, but yeah,
average.
like with, this past weekend with Juneteenth and how
Yeah.
it's not going to be taught in some states. I found that extremely triggering and also concerning that some states just don't want to let people know that this happened to protect what? Like, it's not protecting anybody, it's hurting the people, like you're saying, and again perpetuating hate and leading to more I don't want to even call it misunderstandings, because that would just be way too light.
It's like a myth. They don't want to teach it because they want to keep the myth of how this country was founded and who this country belongs to. I think that's really a big root cause of like white supremacy, and when being a patriarch goes wrong, is there's this myth of who this country belongs to. So they don't really talk about Native Americans, and they all came over here and essentially slaughtered them and stole everything. They don't want to talk about that it was literally built on the backs of Black people and Asian people and Mexican people. They don't really want to talk about that because they want to keep the myth that somehow they are entitled to this country.
Right.
And that's why they don't want to teach it.
Absolutely. And on top of that, I think the idea of like, how can we incorporate education, but also healthcare reform? And what does it mean to like, break this stigma of mental health? Like, I am very big about talking about mental health on my platforms as well. And that is, of course, related to all of the trauma. And whether that's generational, whether that's historically factual, like that is all like affecting where we are today. Also, even just learning about something that maybe you're like for me at least, I was like outraged that like I didn't know a lot about like Juneteenth. Like, I honestly had never heard of it before last summer. And
a lot of people didn't know what it was.
Right. Like, I'm a 22-year-old person in New York City, in a city that I thought was very diverse and very liberal, and very historically correct. Like, clearly something's wrong there that I didn't hear about this very monumental and important part of history. So it comes down to that. And then also, how do you cope with that? Like, how can teachers also talk about, again, all of these generational traumas that have caused historical structures to exist in a way that causes mental health problems for people and create stigmas? How can we break that? How can teachers be more compassionate to their students? How can, we just tackle overall, like,
I know how we break that. We start paying teachers more money because they are extremely underpaid, undervalued.
Right.
So we pay teachers more money. B, we funnel more money into education. So we have smaller classes. You can be more attentive to the children. Also, we provide them with more supplies, whether it's books, laptops, whatever it is, just to be technologically literate, because we're clearly falling behind the rest of the world when it comes to like AI and technology and all that. And then it also goes back to, what number am I on? Either on B or C or D, whatever. And then the missing piece of that is, if we want our teachers to educate our children, we need to educate our teachers. So I think that the teachers then need to have their own education, their own summits and conferences and retreats to learn the tools that we want them to teach our children. Because like anything, you can't give what you don't have. So if our system has been this way for so long, it's pretty much guaranteed those teachers weren't taught the skills that we want them to teach our children. Like, you can't teach algebra if you never learned it. So you can't teach emotional intelligence if you're not emotionally intelligent. So I think that's where it goes.
I 100% agree. I also think this idea of having, mental health professionals, like, I know they have the school nurse and they have the guidance counselor, but I don't think there was ever like a mental health and well-being counselor. I know maybe some universities have like a health center. To my knowledge, I know I never went to a therapist at my university. I sought external help, especially just because of my specific condition and experience. But in high school, I don't remember there being anyone besides like a guidance counselor or a nurse to like approve my accommodations. Same with middle school. And again, back to even college, like I'm pretty sure they just like added more therapists or mental health workers within like the student health center. But if there was like quite literally like a hub of professionals, that there was like eating disorder coaches, mental health coaches, burnout coaches, even like confidence coaches of like how can, and also like this just popped into my head, like
Sure.
when you take a public speaking class, like why are we not talking about like being confident and delivering with confidence from like a coaching and identity perspective, rather than like you need to deliver a perfectly memorized speech, you know?
Yeah.
Like if you just think of, I think, mental health that way, then maybe we can find the right teachers. But yeah, it comes down to funding and just
Yeah.
the right educators being there.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Gigi, this was great. Thank you so much for your time. I know we covered a lot of tough topics, but meaningful ones. So if there was one thing that you want us to take away from our time together, what would that one thing be?
Definitely check your privilege on social media, whoever you are, wherever you are. Also, just like we talked about in the beginning, be aware of what you're putting out and who your audience is, and just being mindful of who's consuming your content and the words you use, even, and the places you're even posting about. Like, if you're on vacation at some on native land or on historical land, be mindful of who was there before and the people that built it, and that, you know, leave you in a position again of privilege today where you're able to tour this place or be there for fun. So there's way more that I'm sure we could go into, and we definitely will have to connect offline, Candy, about everything, because you're
Definitely.
incredible. But
No,
yeah,
definitely.
just be mindful. Be
Yeah.
mindful,
Yeah.
people.
And where can we find you, Gigi? We need more Gigi in the world.
You can find me at gigirobinson.com, at It's Gigi Robinson on every social, and at Gigi on Spotify Green Room.
Yay! Congratulations, Gigi.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us. So thank you everyone for listening. If you're listening on the podcast, don't forget to subscribe, rate and review, and share with a friend. If you're watching this on the YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. Like and subscribe and share as well. And until next time, everyone, be well. Bye.